For more than 5 years, it was a mystery, an unsolved case with many leads, suspicious characters, and so many rumors. Investigators released very little information, but journalists, podcasters, and true crime followers all speculated on what happened to best friends Abby Williams and Libby German, two teenage girls living in the small rural community of Delphi, Indiana, a town with just 3,000 residents. On February 13, 2017, the girls had a day off from school, and they decided to go on an outdoor adventure. They were dropped off near the Monon High Bridge, and that's where their bodies were found the next day. More than 5 years later, Richard Allen was arrested for the murders, but he is claiming his innocence, and the defense has their own theory of the case. A group of white nationalists who practiced the ancient Nordic religion of Odinism murdered the girls in a ritualistic killing. They also claim the reach of these local Odinists goes all the way to the prison where he is being held. Tonight, we take a look at this alleged Odinistic conspiracy, from the scene of the murders to the suspected killers to the prison and the guards watching Richard Allen as we continue our investigation of the Delphi murders. I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments as we take a lot of time to take a look at the Delphi murders. Now, there's two ways of looking at what we're going to do this hour. Two ways to look at it. Number one, the defense is alleging all of this, okay? So it's the defense who is making allegations relative to this Odinism. Two ways to look at that. One, does it just kind of raise a doubt as to what's really going on here, right? And that's a tactic that is used by criminal defense attorneys in every criminal case that we cover, right? There's some way that they're trying to, they always say, muddy the waters, right? That's one way to look at what we're going to go through tonight. The other way to look at it is this the truth? Is this what really happened? Is an innocent man being charged with murder? Now, from my perspective, especially at this point of everything, actually all the time, I'm concerned with what the truth is. What is the truth? So we're going to go through this Odinism to figure out what exactly it means relative to the truth. Not like, oh, yeah, it could really, mess up the prosecution. No. Tonight we're going to try to figure out the relationship of what they are alleging to the truth of what happened to these two girls. And this is it's a horrific case. We know that. This is terrible, terrible what happened to Libby and Abby. The murder scene was strange. There were things at this murder scene that were a little bizarre, perhaps staged, perhaps a ritual. Whatever it was, this was not a normal, and I don't want to say, there's never like anything that's normal when you talk about murder, but it's not someone is killed and then the killer just gets out of there and the body is just left wherever it was. There was something that was done at that scene afterwards, and then the clothing, all of it. It was strange. And the question is, what's the significance of all that? We're going to dive into that tonight. Richard Allen is saying, I didn't do it. He's saying the Odinists did it. I mean, it's a clear finger they are pointing in this case. And we're going to take a look. We'll take a look at the scene. We'll also take a look. We won't name anyone, but we'll take a look at the people that he's pointing the finger at and what circumstances surrounding those people that have the defense alleging that Richard Allen is innocent and these other people are guilty of this horrific murder. And then we've got to take a look at what's happening in that prison where he's being held. He's alleging that you've got some prison guard pagans who are practicing Odinism. That it's not just the murder scene, it's the murder scene, it's the killers, and it's the people who are guarding him inside the prison. So we're learning more this week.
we've got to take some of these pieces and figure out, you know, is it a case where there's like just a little trace of truth to it and then it's kind of being expanded out? Or is there something to this? Because again, this is a case, took 5 years to get to this point for an arrest. But now the defense has turned it around and said, well, wait a minute, this is something completely different. So let's begin at the prison, because this is the latest stuff and information that we've gotten, because we've got a response from the prosecution and the prison guards themselves. So the defense in their memorandum is alleging that members of a pagan Norse religion, Odinism, predates Christianity, hijacked by white nationalists. So it's an actual religion, but it's been hijacked by white nationalists who ritualistically sacrificed Abigail Williams and Liberty German. That is clear. That's what their allegation is. That's who did it. The evidence shows that during his pretrial incarceration at the Westville Correctional Facility, Richard Allen has been monitored, intimidated, and mentally abused by correctional officers who are also members of the Odinite cult. Well, how would he know that? Here's the allegation. These Westville corrections officers boldly wore patches on their Department of Corrections uniforms that proclaimed, "In Odin we trust," along with another patch displaying symbols of Odinism, the interlocking triangles. Big allegation, right? On their uniforms, they are wearing these Odinist symbols and being very bold about it. So what was the response from the prosecution and from those prison guards? We've got that for you tonight. The state's response was, and again, we're not naming any of the corrections officers here, that both Sergeant X and Sergeant X have worn patches that refer to Odinism, that those patches reflect that Sergeant Unnamed and Sergeant Unnamed's religious beliefs are not associated with any kind of cult. So they are Odinists? That's what I'm hearing. Now, affidavit from each of these correctional officers. We begin with number one. I have been an acting supervisor in APOD, where the defendant is housed since late February, early March 2023, that I do not practice Odinism and that Norse paganism heathenry is my practicing religion. So it's a different form of paganism. I guess Nordic, because it's Norse, right? Heathenry, not Odinism. I don't know the difference. I'm sure there probably is a difference. You know, there's a difference between Roman Catholics and Greek Orthodox and other types of Christians. I get it. But it's still interesting. Now, here's the big one. I do wear patches on my uniform that identify me as someone who practices Norse paganism heathenry. The patches are real. The patches are real. But says, I am not part of a cult. I am not part of a radical hate group. I have never had a one-on-one conversation with the defendant where I tried to influence him in any way. Correctional officer number two, I do not practice Odinism. I do wear patches on my uniform that can be, but are not associated with Odinism. Can be? So it's an Odinistic patch that, yeah, you could look at it that way, or you could look at it, I guess a different way, right? I guess if someone was wearing a cross, you could say, well, it's a T. It wasn't a cross. I don't know. That the patches pay the utmost respect to my religious higher power, the same way a Christian person would wear a cross. There you go. Okay. How about that, folks? How about that? Let's bring in my guests. Joining me tonight in Indianapolis, Indiana, hosts of the Murder Sheet podcast. Make sure you download tonight, Anya Kane and Kevin Greenlee. And in Salt Lake City, Utah, I saw him shaking his head, retired police commander, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, also an expert on religious cults. Mike King is with us. All right. I'll get to you in a second, Mike, because I know you got a lot to say about this. All right, Anya and Kevin, so this was the week where we had the response, and am I reading anything wrong? And do you have more information that it seems these guards, two of these guards were wearing patches associated, whether directly or loosely, or could be interpreted as Odinism.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and we've learned a lot about heathenry and paganism since all this came out. But heathenry is a blanket term that refers to people who believe in the Germanic gods of old, the Norse gods of old. And that includes people who are not racist, they're not in cults, they're just normal people like you and I, like just like how I'm a Roman Catholic, right? And that's their religion. Nothing wrong with that. Odinism refers to a slice of that community that takes that and is white supremacist. They're linked to prison gangs. So basically calling all people who are heathens Odinists is a bit like calling all Mormons or people of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, affiliating them with followers of Warren Jeffs, who runs a polygamous cult that targeted young children. So it's kind of like the defense is painting with a very, very broad brush when they refer to basically all symbols associated with heathenry as being directly linked to Odinism, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It does. And we've been saying from the beginning, freedom of religion in this country. You can practice whatever you want. I mean, this religion predates Christianity. It's been around a long, long time. But how common is it? Because before this, I'll be honest, never heard of it. Don't have any friends who have ever discussed it with me if they practice it or if they know people that practice it. In all your research, you're finding that it's more common than we might think?
I think it's interesting because we've definitely found and heard from a lot of pagans and heathens who've reached out to us saying, I in no way am involved with child murder or child sacrifice. That's not what me and my fellow members of the faith are about. So we've definitely heard more about it now just because it's being sort of targeted by the defense in their, scheme of a grand conspiracy involving Odinists across the state. And so I think it's probably a little more common than we might think. And again, most heathens are very normal, just nice people. Odinism, the sect, the kind of side of things that aren't so nice, that is linked to white supremacy, criminal gangs, prison gangs. So that is where you actually do get people who are, maybe more, concerning, I suppose.
Right, and that's where the defense says that it's been hijacked by white nationalists, which would be folks in prison. And the question is that where these prison guards are? Or are they on the other side of this? All right, Mike King, when this all came down, we were like, there's no way that you're allowed to wear these patches if you're a prison guard. Like, you wouldn't be able to wear, whether it's the Star of David or something that would show that you're a Christian, a cross, Jesus. I don't think you would do that on your actual, but apparently it was permitted. So what are you taking away from this tonight, Mike?
That once again, expect the unexpected in these kinds of cases that we look at on court TV, Vinny. I mean, I was one who stood up on your show and said, I don't believe it. And I'm still scratching my head thinking, who made the rule that allowed that kind of wackery to happen? There's a thing called separation of church and state. And the inmate deserves to know that this is a fair and impartial system. The people working in that system need to know that I don't have to share what my favorite kind of brownie is or anything else. I need to go and do a job of ensuring that inmates remain in a facility, that they're given opportunity to grow and develop and hopefully get better, but that we protect the community from them when they're in there. And I'm just so disappointed in the fact that they were allowed to do that. And hopefully when that rule came down and they pulled those off of their uniforms, somebody did a serious relook at what a uniform should look like.
And Anya and Kevin, the warden permitted it, right? It wasn't like these were rogue officers who were breaking rules there. This was actually permitted.
Yes, it was permitted. And in fact, one thing that was interesting in these new materials that came out is that it was also emphasized that these two guards happen to have very good records. They don't have records of abusing prisoners. They certainly don't have any records of threatening prisoners or trying to coerce them into making certain statements. So I think it's pretty clear that if it was against the rules, the guards would not have been wearing the patches.
All right. got some more to share with everyone tonight. And the reason why this is extremely significant is part of the evidence against this defendant is a confession. Take a look. On April 3rd, 2023, Richard Allen, and he's in prison at this point, made a phone call to his wife, Kathy Allen. In that phone call, Richard Allen admits several times that he killed Abby and Libby. Investigators had the phone call transcribed, and the transcription confirms that Richard Allen admits that he committed the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. He admits several times within the phone call that he committed the offenses as charged. His wife, Kathy Allen, ends the phone call abruptly. So then the defense said, corrections officers were within earshot of every conversation between Richard and his attorneys, and even between Richard and his wife, close enough that Richard would have to be worried about any conversation with his attorneys and with his wife being overheard by Sergeant Blank and Sergeant Blank or other corrections officers. Corrections officers even required that Richard Allen be positioned facing the window where the corrections officer was videotaping the attorney visits with the handheld camcorder. Richard would therefore not be able to privately discuss anything with his attorneys, such as, quote, "The guards are telling me that my wife and family will be killed unless I call my wife and tell her that I killed those girls." So, Anya and Kevin, this is the significance of all of this, because he's saying, or the defense is saying, this confession to my wife was made under duress and direct threat by these officers who had been wearing those patches.
Yeah, I think the most telling thing about that page is the associated footnote, number 15, in which the defense attorneys make it clear that he never said anything to that effect, that the guards never threatened to kill his wife in exchange for a confession, but you know, it could have happened.
It was basically speculation on the part of attorneys. It was basically speculation on the part of Allen's attorneys, and it is important to note that this is something that is strongly denied by the prosecution in these filings. They have these guards giving sworn affidavits under penalty of perjury, strongly asserting that they never made any threats to Richard Allen, never tried to coerce Richard Allen into making any statements.
Yeah, that's where the memo gets a little conspiratorial, in my opinion, but it's definitely an interesting strategy.
Oh, it's a strategy, but you have to have a good faith belief if you're going to allege that in court. You can't drop footnotes in the courtroom. I don't think. So, Mike, so this is an important piece of evidence for the prosecution, because this is a case that, you know, directly linking this defendant. The obvious way you link a defendant to a crime is through a confession, and the jury has to believe that this confession is not coerced, that it was voluntary. What are your thoughts about everything that's going on allegedly in this prison and him making this call? Does it have the ring of truth to you that he would confess to his wife?
Yeah, it does have a ring of truth to me that he would confess, Vinny. And I think back to one of your guests who talked about the stressors that are on inmates and the need to kind of cleanse at certain points throughout the incarceration period. I think this thing's going to really boil down to transparency and what protocol is in that facility. Is he being treated differently, and do they have a reason to justify him being treated differently, or is this the way that every inmate is being treated in there? And boy, I agree with Anya and Kevin on this concept of the defense merely bringing up, hey, by the way, this could have happened. Well, aliens could have beamed into his room and said something too. And I just think it was really inappropriate. Again, I have to keep pinching myself and saying, wait and see as more evidence comes out, because this case keeps just surprising me day after day.
Yeah, the only way that gets in front of the jury is if Richard Allen gets on the witness stand. To me, that's the only way, right? The defense could potentially put it in their opening statement and then hide behind attorney-client privilege, you know, as the good faith basis. I've seen that done successfully in trials, but to get it in front of the jury, it has to come from Richard Allen, because he would be the one that received the threat. And maybe, I don't know why the defense would put it out that way, but it could have something to do with attorney-client privilege and not wanting to reveal or get locked into anything that he may or may not say if and when he chooses to testify, but we shall see. All right, here's the good news. Mike King is staying with us, but Anya and Kevin are taking off. It's the Murder Sheet podcast. Download it. Everything we do here in even greater detail all the time. Great to see you, Anya and Kevin.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Mike, you don't go anywhere. All right, when we come back, we're going to go back to the scene, folks. We're going to take a look at the scene, plus coming up next hour.
In Sarasota County, Florida, the Take Care of Maya trial continues as Maya Kowalski takes the stand with extremely emotional testimony, telling the jury what it was like to be taken from her family and isolated in a hospital.
I would say most of my depression would be revolving around my mom's death and then being taken away and being held at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. And I constantly think about those 3.5 months.
This is Alex Murdoch, my wife and child. Got badly.
On the premiere episode of an all-new Court TV true crime series.
This case was unlike a normal murder case.
Suspicion that they're dead.
No father could do that to their son. No Murdoch could do it to a Murdoch.
He has a long history of deception.
Once I told a lie,
The roads all came back to LA.
I had to keep lying.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rowlands. Premieres Sunday night, 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
That's the killer. That's the killer. Now, did he act alone? Did he act with others? Or is it not the killer? Is it Richard Allen? This case has really taken on a life of its own at this point. You know, it took 5 years. 5 years, nothing, nothing, nothing. Now we've got all these different things happening at once. So let's get to the scene of the crime. And we have put together this graphic that is based upon the description from this defense filing, this defense memo. So you have Libby laying flat on her back, her left arm stretched above her head, touching the base of the large tree. Her right arm was placed along the side of her body. A large branch was placed on her left shoulder. The branch extended above Libby's head and below her legs. Two smaller branches formed a V where her legs joined. Both sides of the V extended upwards towards Libby's head. The branch extended across Libby's body on a line from the right shoulder to the left shoulder. Then we go to Abby, just feet away from Libby at an angle. Abby's legs are feet away from Libby's legs, their heads just a few feet apart. Abby was on her back, elbows bent with her arms placed on her chest. Abby's left hand and arm were the left side of the face, right hand and arm near the right side of her face. Left leg was straight, right leg was bent at the knee. Her bent right leg was under her left leg. 3 tree branches placed on top of Abby in the shape of an asterisk. Above Abby's head, smaller sticks placed over her hair, crudely mimicking horns or antlers. Okay, that's the scene. That's the scene. Let's bring in our guest, still with us, retired police commander, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Mike King. In Orange County, California tonight, investigative producer and author of Forest for the Trees, Chris Todd, is back with us. And finally, in Jacksonville, Florida, retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Koffendorfer is with us. Okay, great to see everyone. So we've got these prison guards allegedly wearing these patches. Now the allegation is that this scene is ritualistic in nature. Chris Todd, what are your thoughts about the scene itself? There's a lot of strange things going on here.
Well, and also just to get my tidbit out tonight is now the discovery file is being leaked. So now supposedly the real photographs of the bodies are being leaked to podcasters. So that's the latest thing that I'm getting flooded with. over the last 48 hours. So
wow.
Yeah. So I'm not going to comment too much about it, but from what I'm sensing is when people talk about the sticks and the shapes, I'm basically getting some people are like, oh, it's a ritual. And I'm getting some people being like, oh, it looks like they're crudely buried in a very dark manner. So there's something there for sure.
So it seems, Jennifer Coffindorfer, what we may have here is one of those like ink blot tests, right? You put it out there, some people see something, some people don't see something. Depends what you're looking for or not looking for.
That's right. Sorry, Vinny. Yes, that's right. I think that those sticks really probably serve to try to mask the bodies and cover them up. But the way they were laid, it made these antler shapes, it made these formations that the defense is saying, look, this is an Odinistic style burial, if you will. And that's what they're running with. Like you said, their ink blot says Odinists. Mine says covering the bodies.
Mike King, you studied religious cults, the way they act, the way they do things. Let me throw out a couple scenarios here. Have you ever heard of like a ritualistic killing done by one person, or is it done by a group when they're doing it as a ritual, as some sort of a sacrifice?
Oh, no, absolutely. There are individuals who have committed ritualistic crimes. Sometimes that can go as far as even a predator who takes someone and they know that that victim, for instance, is religious in nature, and they will use that against them. They will tell them, I'm going to kill your puppy if that's what's important to him. If you tell anybody, somebody else may say, God's going to condemn you forever. But individuals absolutely have taken lives and done ritualistic kinds of things. There are a few examples of groups that have done those kinds of things. And so I think it's something you said was really important in the beginning, Vinny, and that is, are we seeing what we believe is there, or are we believing what we're seeing? And we have to be really careful when we look at the staging that goes on in some of these kinds of cases. We have to think about the predatory mindset as an individual goes from an organized offender into this disorganized state that many offenders do when the crime scene starts to get out of control. And then we start seeing experimentation and all kinds of goofy things happening in these kinds of cases. So we can't read too much into this until we start looking at it in totality. And like our other guests have said, we don't know what this really means. We haven't seen the photographs. I hope we don't see the photographs, and I hope that
I think we all are. Once it goes on the internet, everyone's going to be able to see it.
That just scares the wits out of me, Vinny. People shouldn't have to look at that. And frankly, we don't know. It could be somebody trying to cover them up and the sticks fell in the right places, or it could be very ritualistic in nature.
So, Chris, I mean, you investigated this story, and now we're hearing about Odinism, heathenry, this Norse paganism. Did you come across that? Was it something that hey, there's like this thing that's going on out there? Because the picture the defense is trying to paint, so you got prison guards doing it. You've got this ritualistic scene, and then we've got specific people who are practicing all of this. Did you come across any of that before the defense kind of laid all this stuff out?
Very early on, a lot of the hardcore Delphi people were talking about that, but this is a whole new ballgame. This is another world where they're bringing in the prison guards and the patches and Odinism. And so it was talked about this rune on the tree, and now that picture's online of the blood. And so it was, but now it's like mainstream. And I really feel, I smell some desperation by Richard Allen and his defense team. And if I was Richard, I wouldn't be happy with what they're doing, and I wouldn't be happy with what Richard's doing either. I think it's kind of a mess right now with what's going on with them, you know, trying to blame other people. You know, when there were some serious suspects very early on, now we're going into a patsy. The guards are coercing him. It's kind of like spinning out of control. That's what I feel. I know people, you know.
No, this is what we're trying to understand tonight, is exactly what I mean. So You know, Jennifer, sometimes in a trial, there's always two sides. And right now we've got, you know, the allegations, we've got this defense response. And I say, well, what would be in the middle of all this? Like, is it possible that, do we know anything about Richard Allen's background? Is it possible that he's an Odinist? Like, is that in play here? And that this becomes a good cover because, all right, there might be other Odinists out there, and like the scene has some ritualistic aspect to it? Or what does this scene strike you as? Does it strike you as a crime of opportunity, something that was pre-planned? Or is it a case of some sexual deviancy? What do you venture is happening at this scene?
Well, it's always never made sense that Richard Allen just happened upon these two ladies, these young ladies, and he was prepared. He had a knife, he had a gun, and, you know, was he hunting for victims, or did he just happen upon them? None of this really makes much sense, but I will say, with those patches being identified and those individuals saying, yes, you know, they're Odinistic type patches, that puts some meat on the bone to me for the defense. From the standpoint of a lot of people thought there's no way prison guards have these sorts of patches. Well, guess what? They did. And what's also interesting is just because you don't have a patch doesn't mean you're not an Odinist. And how did Richard Allen even know what those patches meant? He knew. Why did he know?
That's a great point as well. All right, stay where you are, everyone, because when we come back, we're going to talk about those specific suspects. We're not going to name them, just going to give them numbers. But the defense has named them in this memorandum, and we're going to talk about the evidence that they say implicates them as the killers.
I've worked hard all my life. I've gone from being a local reporter to becoming a law student to then even going on to teach other lawyers, all before I came to Court TV. As a journalist, lawyer, and teacher, I learned the secret to success is speaking in your authentic voice. And I bring that lesson to my show, Opening Statements, every morning on Court TV.
Opening Statements with Julie Grant. Weekday mornings at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
Richard Allen, you child murderer! Why did you do it? Shame on you! Shame on you, Richard! You're going to prison for the rest of your life! Shame on you, Richard Allen!
There's Richard Allen. Now, again, we're going through what the defense is saying here, and I said two approaches to this. Is this something that could muddy the waters at trial, or is this the actual truth? Richard Allen is innocent, and somebody else did it. Let's get to who they are pointing their fingers at. As always, we are not naming the names. We're giving these suspects that the defense is pointing at numbers. So let's take a look. This is from the defense. This is from the actual Odin report that was done by investigators in the case. Person one's son was dating Abby Williams at the time of the murders. On February 17th, 2017, the FBI interviewed person one at the Delphi Police Department, and person one said the following. His son was 16 years old and was a friend of Abby. Person one stated that he visited Delphi every weekend to hang out with his friend, person two. When person one would go to person two's house in Delphi, he would bring his son. Person one believes that is when his son would contact Abby. Person one said he and his friend, person two, started a, quote, tribe of Asatru followers. They had meetings at person two's house on Sundays and have 5 or 6 regular members. Asatru is interchangeable with Odinism. Person one's ex-wife told investigators when person one was intoxicated, he told her person one and person two got into a fight while near a river in the woods conducting a ritual. One of them did something the other no longer agrees with, and they no longer talk. She said the river was near person two's house. The friendship between person 1 and person 2 appeared to end around February 13th, 2017. That's the day of the abduction and murder. The girls were abducted February 13th. Person 2's home was 3.1 miles, or a 7-minute drive to the entry point to the area where the girls were murdered. And that's from part 1 of the Odin report. Let's bring back in our guests, Mike King, Chris Todd, Jennifer Coffendorfer. Chris, your thoughts about person 1 and person 2 here. Again, more of these pagan, Odinist heathens in Indiana.
Well, I have a photo of the son with, supposedly he was dating Abby, actually. And I know who they're talking about, his father, which we're not saying anybody's names. And like Nick McClellan said, the prosecutor says this is colorful, but lacking any basis of truth, right? And very unprofessional. So he's already stated that too. So again, we're starting to pull in this conspiratorial angle. And also they mentioned one of these gentlemen supposedly has the mental capacity of an 8-year-old. Okay, that's in the Franks motion. So this is the circus that we're creating with these guys. And I don't know if we're making them famous or we're making them infamous. I don't know what's going on, boots on the ground there, but it's a little out of control in my eye.
Jennifer Coffendorfer, your thoughts about person 1, person 2, also allegedly practicing this rare, unusual, pre-Christian Nordic religion?
Well, again, Vinny, now we're seeing, again, a little bit more meat on the bone, that this just isn't some fantasy or something that isn't really practiced anymore, that they actually had meetings, that they came together. And then certainly this fight that occurred at this time frame, you know, could give someone pause. I think the defense is just merely trying to establish some sense of reasonable doubt in this case, and it's building. The building blocks are coming along for them.
All right, fasten your seatbelt, Mike King. Here we go. This is from the Odin Report, Part 2. On April 7th, 2017, person 1 posted a photo of his hand marked with a rune resembling the formation of sticks found on Abby's body. Trooper Purdy learned person 1 was an Odinist and looked at his Facebook page where he saw a photograph of 2 girls apparently lying on the ground of the forest, posed as if they were dead with tree limbs arranged over their bodies. Person 1 created a creepy painting of a man believed to be Odin hanging upside down from a tree with his legs posed similar to Abby's at the crime scene. This painting also contains 2 hidden Easter eggs, including a red F rune at the base of the tree, just like the F rune painted on the tree at the crime scene. A video from February 2016 seems to show an Odinite ceremony. The ceremony is being filmed by person 1, and towards the end, someone who appears to be person 2 uses his hand to make a marking on a tree. Person 1's Facebook page links him to person 3 in Rushville, Indiana, different part of the state. A witness told law enforcement that on February 14th, 2017, person 3 told her he was in a gang, had been on the bridge with 2 girls that were killed, and that someone named Abigail was a pain and a troublemaker. In 2018, law enforcement gave this witness a polygraph test to determine if she was being truthful about person 3's alleged statements, and she passed. Person 3 was asked to take a mouth swab for DNA testing. He then asked the trooper what would happen if his spit was found on one of the girls at the crime scene. Mike King?
Yeah, I mean, that's great for the defense to be able to create doubt and question in the mind of a jury, and all of this is certainly for that purpose. The thing that is going to be interesting in my opinion, Vinny, is whether there are other corroborating things that back these up, because there are numerous cases where people have shared insider information that is leaked out, and they purported that they had some kind of inside information. We see it in some serial killer cases. I remember Robert Ben Rhodes how offended he was that somebody was getting credit for his murders. Same thing happened with BTK when somebody got wind of some of the things recovered in the investigation and then used it to confess. And we think, how would anybody ever confess to something like this? And frankly, it's just some people have such mundane lives that this is a way for them to have a form of legacy. But how do you discount the kinds of information that's coming forward? And I just hope that the prosecution has solid information that helps them say, we've excluded that because of these things.
All right, everyone stay where you are. We're doing a little change here. We're going to go into some overtime here. So Chris, Jennifer, please stay where you are. We're going to continue our discussion because I want to know about these Facebook links and any sort of connection to Odinism here. This stuff is scaring me. This is scaring me, especially if I'm a prosecutor in the case. But I'm not feeling like we're proving someone else did it. But stay where you are. Coming up next hour.
On the docket tonight in Dedham, Massachusetts, Karen Reed has been accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe, with her car. She claims it's a police conspiracy. And a local video blogger known as Turtle Boy has been leading huge protests at the courthouse. And now, Turtle Boy has been arrested.
Let's talk about the difference between the way Karen Reed was raised and the way Colin Albert was raised. Let's just talk about that, how we got here. Because one of those people is charged with murder and the other is not. And one of those people committed a murder and the other did not.
This is how it's murder. My wife and child got badly.
On the premiere episode of an all-new Court TV true crime series.
This case was unlike a normal murder case.
It's official that they're dead. No father can do that to his son. No Murdoch could do it to a Murdoch.
He has a long history of deception.
Once I told a lie,
The roads all came back to LA.
I had to keep lying.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rollins. Premieres Sunday night, 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Welcome back. We're talking about the Delphi murders. Our guests are still with us, and I want to break this down. And Chris, I'll begin with you. Looking at person one, Facebook posts predating the release of any of this information. Person three, alleged confession. Person three is the one described as having the reduced mental capacity. Person two is the one who's living near the murder scene, 3 miles away, but is having these rituals. Is there a grain of truth to these allegations that you came across? Let's begin with those Facebook posts.
And this will fit. I'm working a case in the Midwest of a young man that was murdered, and it's very similar to this, where some of these people will start to brag and toy with you right after the murders, a year later, in different time frames, and they know they didn't do anything, so they can say crazy stuff. Like they're saying, oh, what if somebody spit on them? Is there DNA? And you're like, whoa, 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 why are you saying that? So I've seen this before, and I'm dealing with it now, and I will say, when you deal with these people and there's like multiple going back and forth, sometimes you believe them, and they get you on these wild goose chases. So I think this is a case of that, where they're saying certain things because they know they didn't do anything, but they want to jump in. These people are from another town. It's a different county, Rush County, and these police getting involved in this, they don't have jurisdiction. So there's a lot of layers here, but that's the basics of where I'm at now.
Yeah. And on that note, Jennifer, if we take a step back, right, because this is now a widening conspiracy, and there would have to be, I would think, some connection between person one, person two, person three, and those correction officers, right? Like they've got to connect them if they want to really bring this together to convince me that the truth is this man is innocent.
Right, Vinny, but the bigger thing that just really gnaws at me is what was done with this crime scene. In other words, is there anything from the crime scene that would connect these individuals? As an example, this rune F on the tree. did law enforcement do the right thing and cut out that rune and the bark and look for DNA? There would have been much, a lot of DNA on there, touch DNA from rubbing and making this rune. The sticks, we know these girls were found by citizenry that were searching. Did they rush to the girls and move the sticks in any way? What about EMS when they came up? Was anything touched? Was anything bothered? When were those pictures exactly taken? And is there DNA that could possibly connect person 1, 2, or 3 to this scene? And at the end of the day, did they have alibis? I just believe the prosecution is going to be able to hopefully make some distinctions here, whether they can even be connected, Benny.
All right. Big thank you, Mike King, Chris Todd, Jennifer Coffendoff for working overtime.